The sun was beating down on the port of Miami when my life cracked open. Kids were laughing, seagulls screaming, the cruise horn blaring so loud it rattled my ribs. I was standing there with my suitcase, sunscreen still sticky on my face, when my phone buzzed. One message, 11 words. Mom, plans changed. Vanessa thinks it's better if this trip is just for our little family. My name is Margaret Cole. I am 62 years old, and I watched my own son wave from the upper deck of that ship while pretending not to see me. His arm wrapped around his perfect wife, my grandchildren smiling into her phone. But what they didn't know was that this time, the woman they left behind wasn't the same one they thought they could break. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. I always say stories travel farther when hearts recognize themselves in them. That day at the port, I stood frozen, the heat rising off the concrete, the ship pulling away like it was taking my whole life with it. I didn't cry, not then. I just gripped the handle of my suitcase and felt something inside me shift, slow and quiet, like a door I didn't know I had was finally unlocking. I didn't go straight home after leaving the port. My feet took me to a quiet corner of a bus stop, the kind with a cracked plexiglass roof and an old advertisement peeling in the sun. I sat there, the metal bench burning my legs through my dress, and for a moment the world felt like it was tilting. I could still see the ship drifting away, a floating hotel of laughter and clinking glasses, taking with it the people I had poured my entire life into. But pain has a strange way of pulling you backward before it pushes you forward. As I stared at the street ahead of me, memories began to surface, one after another, like Polaroids developing in slow motion. I wasn't always this quiet, careful 62-year-old woman bracing herself on a boiling metal bench. There was a time I was fierce, even if no one noticed. Maybe that fierceness began the night Ethan was born. He came into the world screaming, the kind of scream that filled the whole delivery room and startled even the seasoned nurse. My ex-husband, Michael, wasn't there. He said the timing was inconvenient, that his supervisor wouldn't let him leave work early. I held Ethan alone, my gown damp with sweat, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead with that relentless hospital hum. I remember looking at that tiny, red, squalling face and feeling a surge of something terrifying, something absolute, a promise. I'll protect you, even if no one protects me. When Ethan was 4, I worked nights at a 24-hour grocery store, scanning barcodes until my wrists throbbed. I'd come home smelling like freezer air and spilled laundry detergent, peel off my shoes, and find him asleep on the couch with his cheeks pressed against one of his toy trucks. His father was usually out with friends, which was the polite way of saying places I didn't want Ethan anywhere near. One night, after a long shift, I found Ethan awake, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with the TV flickering blue across his face. He looked up and said, "Mom, the lights went out." I didn't tell him I had forgotten to pay the electric bill because I was too busy covering rent. I just lit a candle, warmed soup on the gas stove, and laughed with him like we were camping. I didn't know it back then, but that night would matter later. It taught Ethan that I would always make the dark feel safe, even if it killed me. By the time he entered elementary school, Michael was gone for good. No goodbye note, no forwarding address. I told Ethan his dad loved him but wasn't good at staying. The truth was uglier, and ugliness feels heavier when you hand it to a child. There was a boy in Ethan's first-grade class, bigger than the others, who liked to push kids around. One afternoon, Ethan came home with torn knees on his jeans and eyes rimmed with red. He didn't want to talk, but when I soaked his pants in the sink, I saw the pattern of a shoe print near the rip. My heart cracked so loudly I swear I could hear it. The next morning, I marched into the school, still wearing my grocery store polo shirt from my overnight shift. The halls smelled like pencil shavings and cafeteria pancakes. The bully's mother looked me up and down like she had stepped in something. Her perfume was thick, too sweet, like overripe fruit. She said boys will be boys with a smirk that made me want to throw her perfume bottle straight into the nearest wall. I looked at her, voice steady. "Not my boy." The principal stepped in before things escalated, but that moment stuck with me. I didn't know it at the time, but standing up for Ethan that day planted something deep in him, a belief, Mom handles everything, she won't break. The dangerous part was that he wasn't wrong, not then. Years passed. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I folded hotel towels until my knuckles cracked from the bleach. I stocked shelves past midnight, humming quietly so I wouldn't fall asleep standing up. While other mothers posted pictures at sports games and Christmas concerts, I was clocking in and out, always running, always stretching myself thin but smiling so Ethan wouldn't feel the weight. His high school graduation hit me harder than I expected. When he walked across that stage in his blue robe, I felt tears burn my eyes. Not because he was stepping into adulthood, but because I had survived long enough to get him there. After the ceremony, he hugged me so tight my ribs hurt. He whispered, "Mom, someday I'll take care of you the way you took care of me." I held on to those words like they were sacred scripture. I didn't know it then, but promises made in youth often dissolve in adulthood like ink under running water. Then came Vanessa. The first time he brought her home, she walked into my apartment with a polished smile, the kind that didn't touch her eyes. She complimented my decor, though I could tell she was mentally rearranging every piece of furniture. She said my apple pie tasted just like her grandmother's, but her tone carried the faintest suggestion that her grandmother's was better. Ethan adored her. He lit up when she spoke, softened when she touched him, bent like a willow toward every suggestion she made. I didn't blame him for loving her. She was beautiful, ambitious, and knew exactly how to sparkle in a room. But something in her gaze made me nervous, a calculating glint, a sense that she wanted a life curated like her Instagram feed. I didn't fit the aesthetic. At their wedding, tears streamed down her cheeks when I handed Ethan the house papers. Their first home, the surprise I had spent years saving for. Vanessa hugged me, pressed her cold cheeks to mine, and whispered, "You'll always be part of our family." Cameras flashed, laughter echoed. I didn't know it that day, but those words would become the cruelest lie she ever told. The early years of their marriage were good enough. Lily was born with her father's eyes, Jonah with Vanessa's smile. I babysat whenever they needed, which was often. I made pancakes in animal shapes, washed tiny socks that always lost their pairs, and spent hours kneeling on the living room rug building train tracks with Jonah while Lily braided my hair lopsided. There were moments I felt like the center of their home, but little cracks began to form. A comment here, a shift in tone there, a glance exchanged between Ethan and Vanessa that I wasn't meant to catch. One Thanksgiving, Vanessa mentioned they were thinking of starting their own holiday traditions, just the 4 of us. The way she said 4 made the air feel colder. Ethan didn't correct her. He didn't look at me at all. Still, I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. Years layered on top of each other until the cruise idea appeared. At first, they invited me with enthusiasm. Vanessa sent me links to matching family shirts. Ethan told the kids, "Grandma's coming too." I let myself believe it would be a memory we would all share, one to replace the ones fading at the edges. I didn't know it then, but that cruise invitation wasn't a bridge. It was the fuse. I remember the day they officially booked the cruise. Ethan called in the middle of the afternoon while I was clipping coupons at my kitchen table. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin golden stripes, dust floating in the air. His voice was excited, rushed, the way he used to sound when he was a kid telling me about a school field trip. "Mom, we found the perfect ship. 7 nights, Caribbean route, water slides for the kids. Vanessa got a discount through her company." I could hear Lily shrieking something in the background, the happy kind of shriek that echoed through my tiny apartment like a promise. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. It felt like one of those rare moments where everything aligned, where the family I built with my bare hands was extending an arm back toward me. Vanessa even said she was planning special outfits for everyone, he added. Matching colors. Matching colors. I didn't know it back then, but that detail would come back to haunt me later. The weeks that followed felt like suspended sunlight. I bought sunscreen, a new straw hat, 2 dresses for the formal dinners. I even let the salesgirl talk me into a floral scarf I didn't need. It made me look like a woman who traveled, a woman who saw the world. I wanted Ethan to look at me on that ship and feel proud. Silly, isn't it? At 62, still wanting your child to look at you the way they did at 10. But around that time, I also started noticing shifts small, almost invisible, but sharp if you paid attention. One evening, I stopped by their house to bring Lily a homemade peach cobbler. When Vanessa opened the door, her smile was tight, like she had to pull its corners upward manually. "Oh, Maggie, we didn't know you were stopping by." Ethan quickly came behind her, greeting me with a warmer expression, but the air felt off. The house smelled like freshly lit candles and disinfectant, the staged scent of a place meant to look perfect. There were family photos on the wall, recent ones from the zoo, from Jonah's soccer games, from Easter brunch at some trendy restaurant. I wasn't in any of them. Not one. I handed Vanessa the cobbler. She held it with her fingertips, like it might drip. "Thank you," she said. "The kids will love it." But she didn't invite me inside. Just a small thing, a tiny fracture. But fractures grow. Another time, I gently suggested maybe I could take the kids to the beach one Saturday, give them a break. Vanessa smiled her polished smile. "You're so sweet, but we're trying to balance our schedule a bit. You know, healthy boundaries." Healthy boundaries. That phrase stung more than I admitted. It made me feel like a stray cat lingering too close to a spotless porch. I didn't know it then, but this pattern was already forming the knife they would later twist without hesitation. Still, the cruise kept me hopeful. I held on to it the way a drowning person holds onto driftwood. A whole week together. Meals, laughter, sunsets, memories I could cradle when the house grew too quiet. The night before the trip, I packed my suitcase with trembling hands. Not from nerves, from happiness. I laid everything out neatly: swimsuits, sandals, dresses, sunscreen. I even tucked in an old photo of Ethan at 10 years old on a beach in Mexico, grinning with 2 missing teeth. I imagined showing it to Lily and Jonah, telling them stories only a grandmother could tell. I didn't know it that night, but those items in my suitcase would become symbols of something else entirely: blind trust and the cost of it. The next morning, Ethan came to pick me up. He hugged me, but his body felt stiff, like his mind was somewhere else. Vanessa stayed in the car, adjusting something on her phone. The kids waved excitedly through the window. "Mom," Ethan whispered as he placed my suitcase in the trunk. "Things have been tense. Vanessa and I, we're trying to figure some stuff out." I asked him what he meant, but he shook his head. "Let me handle it." Let me handle it. That was the last thing he said before everything unraveled. I should have heard the warning in his voice, should have seen the storm gathering behind his eyes. But hope can be blinding, it can be deafening. And then came the port. The message, the betrayal, the moment that split my life into before and after. But the truth is, the story didn't start at that port. It started long before, in all the tiny moments where I stepped aside so someone else could shine, where I swallowed hurt so no one else had to taste it, where I believed that love meant bending until your spine learned the shape of sacrifice. After the port, when I finally got home, the silence felt heavy enough to crush bone. I set my suitcase down on the living room floor. The floral scarf slipped out, the colors too bright for the dim little room. I stared at it until my throat tightened. I opened the closet where I kept old boxes, Ethan's baby shoes, his first report cards, photos of us at the cheap zoo we used to visit on free days. I touched the edges of the boxes and felt my heartbeat in my palms. Then something colder pushed through me, a new clarity, a realization that I had built my whole life around people who no longer saw me as the center or even as a page. I was a footnote, a convenience, a placeholder. I didn't know it then. But this clarity was not just grief. It was the beginning of a rebirth. That night, I poured myself a cup of tea, though I let it go cold. The moonlight spilled across my kitchen table. I could feel the shape of a decision forming in my chest, something sharp, something final. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see the ship. I saw the house, the one I bought, the one I paid off, the one that still had my name on every legal document. I went to the drawer where I kept important papers. The air smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. I pulled out the blue folder with the deed. The edge of the document cut lightly against my thumb. I didn't bleed. I barely felt it. But that tiny cut would become the line that divided the life I had and the life I was about to claim. The morning after the crew's betrayal, I woke up before sunrise. My apartment felt colder than usual, like the air itself knew something inside me had cracked. I sat at the edge of my bed, my hands clasped so tight they shook. The silence around me hummed, thick and accusing. For the first time in my life, I didn't reach for my phone to check if Ethan needed anything. I reached for the blue folder instead. When I laid the deed on the table, the embossed seal gleamed under the dim kitchen light. My name. Only my name. It should have made me feel powerful. Instead, it made my stomach twist with a mixture of guilt and revelation. I called Mr. Carter, my attorney. My voice barely worked. I need to understand my options. He paused. Are you thinking of transferring the house? No. My own answer surprised me. I'm thinking of selling it. The quiet on the line was heavy. Legally, you have every right. It's fully in your name. There is no agreement of transfer, no obligation. I felt my heart beat slow. For the first time in years. I didn't know it then, but that calmness would become a weapon. After the call, I went to their house. I used the spare key, something Ethan insisted I keep, in case of emergencies. I guess this counted. As I pushed the door open, the smell of fresh linen and citrus candles hit me. Their house always looked like a magazine photo, spotless and curated. It used to make me proud. Now it made me feel like an intruder in a place that existed only because I paid for its existence. I wandered to the living room. The wall of family photos stared back at me, but something felt wrong. My eyes scanned frame after frame. Disney trips, barbecues, Easter brunch, first days of school. I wasn't in any of them. Not one. My throat tightened. I reached for a frame out of reflex, but halfway there, my hand trembled and dropped. The glass glinted under the ceiling light. In the hallway closet, I found the quilt I had knitted for them, hours of handmade stitches meant to warm my son's new family. It was folded and shoved behind store-bought blankets still in their packaging. I touched the corner of the quilt with the tip of my finger. It felt like touching a ghost of myself. Upstairs, I checked Ethan's office. The air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Papers cluttered the desk, most of them bills and school notices. But then I noticed a manila envelope with a sticky note attached in Vanessa's neat handwriting. After she pays last mortgage. Mention kids if needed. My chest went cold. I opened the envelope. Inside was a draft for transferring the house deed into their names, dated 3 months earlier, never shown to me. My hands shook so violently I had to sit. They were waiting for the right moment, waiting for me to finish paying, waiting until I was too softened by love to refuse. I wasn't supposed to see this, but I did. And the truth cut deeper than any betrayal at the port. I didn't know it then, but this discovery would fuel everything that came next. The next days unfolded in small ruptures, each one widening the gap they had created. Denise, my realtor friend, met me for coffee. She listened to everything, her face tightening with every detail. Maggie, this isn't just disrespect. This is strategy. Her words stabbed me. Strategy. I always thought love was something you gave, not something people used. She leaned in. If you want to sell, I can have buyers in a week. Faster if we price aggressively. I took a breath. Do it. That single sentence felt like exhaling years of exhaustion. That evening, Ethan called from the ship. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail, his voice light, unaware, happy. Hey, Mom, we're having such a good time. Kids miss you. We'll call again tomorrow. My jaw clenched. Not a single word about the message at the port, not a single apology, just a continuation of the script where I was expected to smile and wait. 2 days later, Denise texted, "Found a couple, young, cashed up, serious. We arranged a showing. I needed to be in the house again. I needed to prepare it." I told myself it was just logistics, but something inside me ached each time I turned a corner. In the kitchen, I wiped the counters slowly. My fingertips dragged across the stone like I was memorizing it for the last time. I opened drawers, organizing things even though I knew everything would be moved soon. Maybe it was habit, maybe denial. As I stepped into the backyard, I heard a voice from behind the fence. It was Mrs. Ellison, the older neighbor, holding her gardening shears. "Oh, hi, Maggie. You're visiting while they're on vacation?" I forced a smile. "Just picking up a few things for them." She nodded. "They're lucky to have you. Most parents would have kept that house. Not many people give gifts like that. Her words hit me sharper than she could ever know. Lucky. Is that what they felt? Later that afternoon, as I packed small items into boxes for the moving company, Ethan texted again. "Mom, everything okay? Haven't heard from you." Then another. "Vanessa wants to know if you watered the plants. We forgot to ask." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. Water the plants. After everything. I didn't respond. I didn't know it then, but my silence was the first boundary I ever set in my adult life. 2 days before Ethan and Vanessa returned from the cruise, the house went under contract. Cash offer. Fast closing. Mr. Carter handled everything with the calm efficiency of a man who'd seen family wars before. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to decide which way I'd fall. The day before the closing, I walked through the house one last time. I moved slowly, like each room needed permission to let me go. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room windows, casting long rectangles on the floor. This room once held Ethan's first steps, his first tantrum, his first heartbreak, all the moments he swore he'd never forget, but somehow he forgot me instead. I didn't know it then, but this walkthrough was the last thread tethering me to the old version of myself. In the master bedroom, I found a framed picture of Ethan and Vanessa at their wedding rehearsal. His arm wrapped around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. I remembered that night vividly. The joy, the tension, the way Vanessa's mother had pulled her aside and whispered something sharp, followed by Vanessa shooting me a brittle smile. I placed the frame face down on the bed. It made a soft thud, muffled by the duvet. In the kids' room, Lily's stuffed bunny sat on the pillow, one eye slightly loose. I picked it up, my chest tightening. A memory surfaced. Lily, at 3 years old, crawling into my lap and whispering, "Grandma, don't leave yet." But somewhere along the way, I had been pushed out of the center of their world, replaced, rewritten. A soft knock startled me. It was Denise, standing at the doorway with her hands in her pockets. "You sure you want to be here alone?" I nodded. "I have to be." She hesitated. "Maggie, when they find out, it's gonna get ugly." I breathed out slowly. "It already is." As she left, I heard her mutter, "They did the one thing people should never do. They underestimated you." After she was gone, the house felt too quiet, too expectant, like it knew what was coming. That night, Ethan called again. This time, I answered. "Mom," he said, relief flooding his voice. "We were worried. Everything okay?" I swallowed. "Yes. You sound off. Did something happen?" I almost told him right there, but he deserved to find out the same way he excluded me. Suddenly, without warning, without a voice in the process. "Nothing happened," I said. "Hope you had a good trip." There was a brief pause. "Mom, But I hung up before he could finish. The next morning, I met the buyers, handed them the keys, and signed a final stack of documents. Their excitement was palpable, buzzing through the air like static. They kept talking about paint colors and office spaces and future plans, the kind of plans my son never thought I deserved to be part of. When the deal closed, Mr. Carter shook my hand. "You did the right thing, Maggie." I wasn't sure if right was the word. Necessary, maybe. Long overdue, definitely. I went home to my apartment, brewed chamomile tea, and wrote the letter, the one they'd find on the kitchen table, the one that would tear open everything they thought they controlled. The words came out clear, steady, almost frighteningly calm. When I finished, my hand didn't shake, not even once. That night, just before sleep, I got a message from Ethan. "We're docking tomorrow at 6. Kids can't wait to see you. Can we come for dinner?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I typed nothing. For years, my silence meant surrender. This time, it meant power. The next evening, I sat at a small cafe near the port. I watched families reunite, children rushing into open arms, couples embracing, luggage wheels rattling across concrete. My heart tightened with something raw and ancient, a longing I'd never fully admit. Then I saw them. Ethan, Vanessa, the kids, tanned, smiling, carrying giant souvenir bags, Lily waving a toy dolphin, Jonah wearing a straw hat. They looked happy, whole, complete. Without me. I stood up before they could notice and walked away. The cafe door chimed softly behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't know it then, but that moment turning away from them would be the crack that made room for everything new that would arrive later. A new life. A new version of myself. And a revenge so quiet, so precise, it would echo louder than any scream. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The city outside my window was still half asleep, washed in a pale blue light that made everything look softer than it really was. My phone buzzed non-stop on the nightstand, calls, texts, notifications stacking like debris before a storm. I didn't touch it. Instead, I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee, hands wrapped around the mug for warmth. I kept picturing the house, imagining the exact moment they'd pull into the driveway, laughing, exhausted from travel, expecting normalcy, expecting me. It was almost noon when the first explosion happened. A knock at my door, hard, frantic, the kind that rattles the frame. I took a slow breath before opening it. Ethan stood there. His face was drained of color, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked older than I remembered, tired, uncertain. His voice cracked. "Mom, what did you do?" I stepped aside, letting him in. He moved quickly, pacing back and forth in my living room like he was trying to outrun the truth. "The house," he stammered. "We walked in and people were there, strangers, new furniture, new curtains. They said they bought it. They showed me a contract." His voice broke completely. "Mom, tell me this is a mistake." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "There's no mistake, Ethan." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he'd forgotten how to breathe. His hands trembled at his sides. "You sold our house?" I corrected him gently, firmly. "My house." He blinked rapidly. "That's not fair. You knew we lived there. You knew that's where the kids—" "Yes," I said quietly. "I knew." His voice rose, sharp and wounded. "Why would you do that to us?" My chest tightened, but not with guilt. With clarity, "I didn't do anything to you. I did something for myself." He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It split at the edges. "You blindsided us. We walked in and everything was gone, our things, our furniture, just a letter on the table. God, Mom!" Lily cried. "Jonah kept asking if we were homeless. What did you expect?" I looked down at my hands, remembering the pen as it glided across that letter, how steady it felt. "I expected you to understand consequences." His voice dropped, low and dangerous. "This is revenge." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it's the first time in my life I stopped begging for scraps." He froze. His eyes softened just enough for guilt to seep through. "Vanessa is a wreck, Mom. She's saying she can't believe you'd do this to your own family." I met his gaze, cold and unwavering. "Vanessa told me the trip was just for your little family. I'm simply respecting that boundary." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, a silence that said everything louder than words ever could. Ethan rubbed his face, groaning. "What are we supposed to do now? Where are we supposed to live?" "There's a storage unit under your name," I said. "Paid for 3 months. That should be enough time." He shook his head slowly, disbelief clouding every feature. "You wanted to hurt us." I stepped closer. "No. If I wanted to hurt you, I would have kicked you out myself months ago. I would have told you exactly how invisible you made me feel. Instead, I walked away quietly, and you didn't even notice I was gone." His lips parted, but he didn't speak. For the first time, he looked at me not as a mother, not as an accessory, not as a background character he could return to when convenient. He looked at me as a person, and that seemed to terrify him. "You should have talked to me," he whispered. "I did, Ethan, for years. You just didn't hear me." He sank onto the edge of my couch, his shoulders collapsing inward. He looked like the little boy I once held during thunderstorms, scared and confused, waiting for someone to tell him everything was okay. "Mom, please, tell me how to fix this." "You can't fix it," I said softly. "You can only learn from it." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. Then he said the words I waited decades to hear. "I'm sorry." I exhaled, but the ache didn't leave my chest. Apologies were easier than change. Change required a depth he had not been forced to touch until now. Before I could respond, my doorbell rang again. A sharp, annoyed buzz. Vanessa. She stormed in without waiting for permission. She looked immaculate, hair perfectly straightened, makeup done, but her eyes were wild, frantic. "How could you do this?" she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you put us through? The kids were terrified." Her voice cut through the air like glass. I stayed silent. She paced, heels clicking angrily against the floor. "This is insane. You're punishing us for one simple misunderstanding?" I raised an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding?" She scoffed. "We invited you to everything. Holidays, birthdays." I stepped closer. "You never invited me to belong." That shut her up. I continued, voice low and steady. "You used my money, my time, my love, but you never gave anything in return except boundaries that only applied when I wasn't being useful." Vanessa's jaw clenched. "That's not true." "Really?" I asked. "Then why did you draft paperwork to take the house after I made the last payment?" Her eyes widened. Ethan stiffened. "I know," I said. "About the draft. About the note telling you to wait until I was vulnerable enough to say yes." Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped. She turned to Ethan. "You told her?" He shook his head, horrified. "Mom found it." Her perfect composure cracked. For the first time, she looked genuinely shaken. "Maggie, we never meant." I cut her off. "Yes, you did." The room went still. I could hear the muffled hum of traffic outside, a dog barking somewhere down the block. My own breathing, slow and even. I picked up the letter I'd written them, the one Vanessa had thrown into her tote bag earlier, and held it between us. "Everything I needed to say is already here." Vanessa reached for Ethan's arm, her voice trembling. "Ethan, let's go. We can't stay here." He didn't move. "Mom," he said quietly, voice thick, "what do you want from us?" I looked at him, really looked at him. Then I said the 6 words that cut deeper than any revenge ever could. "I want you to see me." He blinked, stunned. Vanessa swallowed, her bravado collapsing into silence. And for the first time in years, they did. Not as the backup plan. Not as the babysitter. Not as the walking wallet. As Maggie Cole. A woman who had finally stopped disappearing. After they left my apartment, the silence settled again. But it felt different this time. Not heavy. Not suffocating. More like the lingering stillness after a hurricane has passed, when the air smells faintly of rain and everything broken is finally visible. I sat on the couch for a long moment, listening to my own breath, feeling my heartbeat steady itself. It was strange how calm I felt after tearing open the foundation of my own family. I made myself a cup of tea and stood by the window. The city lights flickered like 1,000 tiny answers I didn't know I needed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake, more awake than I had in years. And with that awareness came something sharper, something almost electric beneath my ribs. They thought the house was the revenge. But the house was only the beginning. That night, I opened the drawer of my kitchen island and pulled out my old journal. The leather was worn soft from years of holding my quiet fears, dreams I postponed, emotions I never voiced. I flipped to a fresh page, the paper crisp and waiting. Pen in hand, I began writing without hesitation. Not about Ethan, not about Vanessa, not about the house, but about me. About what I wanted next. A trip, a class, a life. Something that wasn't anchored to anyone else. The more I wrote, the more the edges of my anger softened into something else, purpose. A kind of purpose that had been buried under decades of caretaking. I realized I hadn't simply closed a chapter. I had burned an entire book and was now standing in the ashes, ready to write a new one with steadier hands. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. A message from Ethan. "We need time to think. But we'll talk again. I promise." I stared at the screen, then set the phone face down. Promises were easy, change was harder, and for the first time, I wasn't waiting for either. As the hours passed, I cleaned my apartment not from stress, but with a strange sense of ceremony. I opened windows, let the warm Miami night air roll in, stacked a few dishes, rearranged a plant on the windowsill. It felt like preparing a space for someone new to live here, someone I hadn't met yet, someone who was me. At midnight, I finally sat down at my laptop and opened the email draft I'd been avoiding. A one-way ticket, Paris. The city Ruth had begged me to visit for years. The place I always said was too far, too expensive, too unrealistic. But as I hovered over the confirm button, I felt something settle into place. Something like truth. I clicked. The confirmation email landed in my inbox with a soft chime. I exhaled, long and trembling. For the first time in my life, a future existed that didn't revolve around being needed. A future built on my choices, not my obligations. I didn't leave a note for Ethan or Vanessa about the trip. I didn't owe them that kind of explanation, not anymore. Instead, I simply set my passport on the counter where the morning light would hit it, packed a small suitcase, and placed my journal on top of my clothes. As I zipped the case shut, a faint smile pulled at my lips. A quiet smile, a knowing one. They believed losing the house was the end of what I could do. But they hadn't seen anything yet, because the biggest revenge wasn't selling brick and wood. It was walking away from the life they confined me to, and stepping into one they could no longer control. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, subscribe. This story isn't over. Lives don't change in a single moment, and neither do the people in them. What happened to me wasn't just betrayal, it was a quiet awakening, a reminder that sometimes the only way to be seen is to step out of the shadows yourself. Maybe you've felt that kind of stillness too. The kind that arrives after the storm, when the world looks the same but you don't. When you realize you're allowed to choose yourself, even if it surprises the people who thought they knew you best. There are more stories like this, stories about breaking patterns, finding courage, and rebuilding a life on your own terms. If any part of this spoke to you, stay with us. You're not alone, and neither am I.